There are letters that never find their way to the mailbox. Not because we forget them, but because some truths are too heavy to send. I wrote mine 3 weeks ago. Every night, I told myself I'd send it in the morning. And every morning, I didn't. It still lies on the table, unsealed, untouched. To my son, Daniel. Just seeing his name hurts more than I'll ever admit. The house is quiet now. Once it was filled with laughter, footsteps, the sound of him calling, "Mom, where's my jacket?" Now, even the walls seem afraid to speak. He used to come every Sunday, flowers in hand, stories from the city, the same boyish grin that made everything feel right again. But weeks have passed since I last saw him. No visits, no calls, just silence. People in town say it's just a misunderstanding, that time will fix things. But I know better. Time doesn't build bridges when someone else is busy burning them. Someone turned him against me. Someone who wanted my silence more than my forgiveness. And then, this morning, I heard it. That familiar sound of his car pulling up the road. My heart leapt before my mind could stop it. He was here, after all this time. He came back. I almost called his name, but then I heard her voice, Emily. Her laugh was sharp, practiced, cutting through the morning air like glass. "Daniel, you don't owe her anything anymore." "Let it go," my breath caught. She said it so easily, as if love was something you could just discard. That was the moment I finally understood. He hadn't drifted away by accident. He'd been guided, carefully, cruelly, away from me. I walked to the table, folded the letter, and placed it in the drawer. Maybe one day he'll find it. Maybe he'll finally read the words I was too afraid to send. But for now, I'll wait. And while I wait, I'll remember this. She may have taken him from me, but she doesn't know who she's dealing with. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Daniel's laughter could fill this whole house, the kind of laughter that healed whatever was broken inside me. After his father passed, I thought I'd never feel light again. The mornings felt empty, the walls too quiet, the chair across the table too still. But Daniel, he never let me drown in that silence. He was only 20 then, but he carried himself like a man twice his age. He fixed everything, the leaky roof, the old porch steps, even the broken wind chime his father loved. Sometimes I'd stand by the doorway just to watch him work, and when he'd catch me staring, he'd grin and say, "Don't worry, Mom, Dad taught me well." That smile, it was my lifeline. He became my reason to keep breathing. Every Sunday, we cooked together. I'd chop the onions, he'd burn the chicken, and we'd laugh until the kitchen filled with smoke. He'd tell me about his job, the friends he'd made, the dreams he still wasn't sure he could chase. And I'd listen, every word like a promise that life hadn't ended, it had just changed. I remember one evening, as the sun dipped behind the fields, he turned to me and said, "Mom, I hope I make you proud." I told him, "You already have." And I meant it with every piece of my heart. For years, it was just us, two souls patching up the holes life had torn open. And in that quiet little house, I believed nothing could ever come between us. Then one spring afternoon, he walked through the door with someone new. A young woman, elegant, confident, her smile perfectly placed. Her name was Emily. She offered me flowers, lilies, my favorite, and said, "I've heard so much about you, Mrs. Hayes." Her voice was sweet, polished, rehearsed. Her eyes, though, they were sharp, observant, measuring. Daniel's arm was around her shoulder, his face glowing with pride. "Mom," he said, "this is Emily, my fiancée." And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something I couldn't name. Not jealousy, not fear, just unease. Like a storm cloud forming on a clear day, so faint you almost convince yourself it's nothing. I smiled, hugged her, and told her welcome. But deep down, something whispered, "This woman notices everything. And someday that will matter." I still remember the first time I noticed it. The change wasn't loud or sudden. It was quiet, like the faintest creak in a floorboard before it breaks. At first, Emily was everything a mother could hope for in her son's choice. She helped me in the kitchen, complimented my cooking, asked about Daniel's childhood. She even called me Mom once, though it rolled off her tongue like a word she hadn't quite decided to keep. For a while, I let myself believe we might actually become family. But then, small things began to shift, subtle, invisible to anyone but me. Daniel would arrive late for dinner, his smile slightly faded. He'd glance at me, then look away, as if unsure of what he'd find. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd laugh it off. But Emily would always step in first. "She's fine, Daniel. Your mom just worries too much." The words sounded harmless, but her tone was always warm, too warm. The kind that hides something sharp underneath. Then came the first real crack. We were sitting on the porch one evening, the three of us watching the sun disappear behind the fields. Daniel mentioned a new house they wanted to buy in the city, a big one, too expensive for comfort. I smiled and said gently, "Just be careful, sweetheart. Maybe wait a bit. You've worked hard for your savings. Don't rush." Emily's hand tightened around his. "Your mom's just afraid of losing you," she said softly. Then, with that same sugar-sweet smile, she added, "Or maybe she doesn't trust me yet." I froze. Her words slipped between us like smoke, invisible but choking. Daniel turned toward me, confused, searching my face for an answer I couldn't give fast enough. "Of course I trust you," I said quickly. "I just don't want either of you to make a mistake, but the damage was already done." That night, Daniel barely spoke, and when they left, I caught the faint sound of Emily whispering to him by the car. She looked upset when we talked about moving. Maybe she doesn't want us to have our own life. That was the moment I knew. It wouldn't be one big betrayal. It would be a slow one, quiet, careful, built piece by piece from misunderstandings she planted, and he watered with doubt. And I was powerless to stop it. It started with whispers, small, poisonous ones that grew legs and learned to walk through this village faster than the wind. At first, I didn't pay attention. People talk. That's what they do in small towns. But this time, the whispers had my name in them. They said I had told people Emily married Daniel for money, that I'd called her a gold digger, that I was jealous of their happiness. I laughed when Mrs. Porter mentioned it at the grocery store, thinking it was some silly misunderstanding. But then she said, "Well, dear, it was Emily who told me." The world seemed to tilt. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That evening, the sky turned dark earlier than usual. Thunder rolled across the hills, and rain began to fall, the kind that beats against the windows like it's trying to get in. I was setting the table when I heard Daniel's car pull up. He didn't knock this time. He just walked in, soaked from the rain, eyes hard, mouth set in a line I didn't recognize. "Mom," he said, "why would you say that about Emily?" I blinked. "Say what?" "That she married me for money. That she's only here for what Dad left me." My heart dropped. "Daniel, people heard you. Emily said you've been talking about her for weeks." I took a step toward him, but he moved back. The space between us had never felt wider. "Daniel, listen to me. I would never say something like that. You know me." He ran a hand through his wet hair, his voice cracking just slightly. "I thought I did, Mom, but lately, I don't even know anymore." The words cut deeper than any knife could. All the years of laughter, the dinners, the nights we healed each other, gone in a heartbeat. "Son," I whispered. "She's lying to you." His eyes flickered. Just for a second, doubt, pain, love, and then it was gone. "Don't," he said. "Don't talk about her that way." He turned and left before I could find the right words to stop him. The front door slammed. The rain swallowed the sound of his car disappearing down the road. I stood there, shaking, my hands still clutching the dish towel like it could hold me together. And for the first time in years, I felt completely alone. That night, I sat by the window long after the storm had passed. The letter I'd once written to him still lay hidden in the drawer. I wanted to burn it. Instead, I whispered to the dark sky outside, "You'll see the truth one day, my son. And when you do, I'll still be here." They say time heals everything, but they never tell you how cruel the waiting feels when no one comes back. Weeks turned into months. At first, I told myself Daniel was just busy. Then Emily began answering his phone. Her voice always sounded polite, sweet, practiced, but the words never changed. "Daniel's at work. Mrs. Hayes. Daniel's sleeping. Daniel's been really stressed lately. Eventually, she stopped answering altogether. The silence became her weapon, and I was the only one bleeding from it. I kept calling anyway, just to hear the ring. It made me feel like I still existed somewhere in his world, even if he never picked up. My health began to fade, quietly, the way autumn slips into winter. I stopped eating properly. My hands trembled when I tried to tend to the garden, though I still went there every morning. The roses were the only things that listened without judging me. Sometimes I'd sit by the bench near the old oak tree, the one Daniel and his father built together. I'd talk to my husband's photograph, propped up beside me. "He's still my boy," I'd whisper. "He's just lost." For now, the villagers noticed. Some pitied me, others whispered when I passed, their words carried by the same wind that once carried laughter from this house. I tried not to hear them, but you can't silence pity. It finds its way in. And then one morning at the market, it happened. I saw him, Daniel. He was standing by the fruit stand, holding Emily's hand. He looked older, sharper, colder somehow. For a moment, my heart forgot everything it had been through. I smiled, waved softly, and whispered his name. He looked right at me. And then he looked through me, as if I were a stranger. Emily leaned closer, said something I couldn't hear, and he turned away. That's when it broke. Whatever piece of me had been holding on all this time. Not with a scream, not with tears, just silence, the kind that fills your chest so heavy. You forget how to breathe. I stood there, surrounded by familiar faces, but I'd never felt more invisible. When I came home that evening, the garden looked different. The flowers had started to wilt, as if they too had given up waiting for the sun. I sat beside my husband's photo and whispered, "If love can turn into this, maybe it was never love at all." Then I closed my eyes and listened to the wind, hoping somewhere in it I'd still hear his voice, the boy who once promised, "I'll never leave you, Mom." Grief has a strange way of disguising itself. At first, it looks like silence, then stillness. But if you wait long enough, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes fire. That morning started like any other. Another gray, empty day in a house too big for one heart. I was walking back from the post office when I saw Emily's car parked behind the bakery. Her door was open, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice sharp and careless. I should have walked past. But something made me stop. "I told you it worked," she laughed. "Daniel doesn't even talk to her anymore. Poor thing still writes him letters he'll never see. Once the property transfers are final, we're done with the old woman." The words hit harder than any betrayal could. For a moment I couldn't move. It was like hearing my own obituary, written by the person who'd killed me. She ended the call, fixed her lipstick in the mirror, and drove away, as if she hadn't just buried me twice. But that was her mistake. Because something inside me, something I thought had died with my marriage, my family, my hope, woke up again. And it wasn't sadness anymore. It was steel. That night, I took out my husband's old notebook. Inside were the contacts of his lawyer, his accountant, the people who'd once helped us build everything Daniel was about to lose. If Emily wanted to play a game of lies, I would learn her rules and then use them better than she ever could. The next morning, I visited the lawyer's office. It had been years, but he remembered me. He looked startled when I asked for copies of the property and inheritance documents. "I just want to make sure everything's secure," I told him with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. In the following days, I began to connect the pieces, the sudden withdrawals from Daniel's account, the new joint ownership documents Emily had forged, the fake signatures that only someone desperate would overlook. Each discovery felt like breathing again after months underwater. They thought I was broken, but I was just waiting for the right moment. And that moment had finally come. As I closed the last folder and tucked it neatly into my purse, I looked out the window at the fading sunset and whispered, "You took my son from me, Emily. Now I'll take back everything you stole." It's strange how calm I felt the morning everything began to fall into place. Not the trembling kind of calm that comes from fear, but the quiet stillness that comes when you finally stop begging life to be fair and decide to make it fair yourself. I'd spent weeks preparing, collecting papers, setting the stage, waiting for just one moment, One perfect crack in Emily's flawless mask, and then I gave her the bait. A message. "Emily, could you and Daniel come over? I'd like to settle the inheritance matters before winter." I knew she wouldn't resist. Greed has its own heartbeat, and hers was loud enough for me to hear from miles away. She replied within minutes. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes. That's very thoughtful of you." Her politeness almost made me laugh. Almost. When the day came, the air felt heavy, electric, the kind of air that warned of storms even under clear skies. I set tea on the table, arranged the documents neatly, and placed a small recorder behind the flower vase. I told myself it wasn't revenge. It was truth. The kind I'd been denied for far too long. They arrived late, as always. Daniel greeted me with a hesitant smile, but Emily swept in like she owned the place, perfume thick enough to hide the rot underneath. "Such a lovely home," she said sweetly, looking around. "You must miss having company here." Her words stung, but I only smiled. "Let's talk business," I said, my voice steady. As we went over the papers, I mentioned Daniel's father's trust, how certain conditions protected the estate from misuse. That's when it happened. Emily's smile faltered. Her voice dropped. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "He's not even smart enough to read those documents. I handle everything." I looked up slowly, pretending to misunderstand. "Daniel?" I said softly. "He's capable of more than you think." She laughed, sharp and cruel. "Capable? Of what? Believing everything I tell him? He's such an easy fool, Mrs. Hayes. I almost feel bad for him. Almost." And then the front door creaked open. I froze. Emily didn't notice. Not yet. But I did. Daniel's voice came from behind her. Low, broken. "Say that again." Emily turned, color draining from her face. He was standing there, in the doorway, eyes wide, betrayal written across every inch of him. "I said," he repeated, stepping closer, "say that again." The silence that followed was unbearable. Her mouth opened, but the lies didn't come this time. They couldn't, because the truth was louder than any excuse she could invent. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched as the storm I'd been waiting for finally arrived. Daniel looked at me then, his mother, and I saw the moment his world collapsed. The anger, the disbelief, the realization, all crashing together in his eyes. "Mom," he whispered. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he didn't look through me. He looked at me. Emily tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. The space between them was filled with everything she'd destroyed, and I finally exhaled, slow, steady, almost peaceful. Because the truth, no matter how late it arrives, always finds its way home. Truth has a sound. It's not loud, not dramatic. It's the quiet crack that comes right before everything breaks. After Emily's words filled the room like poison, Daniel just stood there, pale and trembling. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Only silence, thick, suffocating, the kind that weighs heavier than screams ever could. "Daniel," Emily whispered, her voice suddenly soft, sugary, desperate. "She's lying. You know how she is. She's always tried to turn you against me." I didn't move, didn't blink. I simply reached into the drawer beside me and placed the recorder on the table. Her eyes widened. Click. The sound of her own voice filled the room. Cold, cruel, undeniable. "He's not even smart enough to read those documents. He's such an easy fool." Each word echoed off the walls like a ghost refusing to leave. Daniel's face crumpled. The color drained from his skin. He turned toward her, eyes filled with something raw, disbelief, pain, shame. "Emily," he said, his voice shaking. "How could you?" But she wasn't done lying. "She never was. She set me up," Emily screamed. "She's been jealous since the beginning. Can't you see? This was her plan all along." I stayed silent. There was nothing left to prove. The truth was already standing naked in the middle of the room, and no lie could cover it anymore. When Daniel didn't answer, she grabbed her purse, tears streaking her perfect face. "You'll regret this," she spat, voice breaking between anger and panic. "You both will." And just like that, She was gone, slamming the door so hard the house itself seemed to flinch. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the ticking clock dared to move. Daniel stood there, staring at the empty doorway, his hands shaking. Then, slowly, he turned toward me. His eyes, the same eyes that once looked through me at the market, were now full of tears. He dropped to his knees beside my chair, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, what have I done?" I reached out, brushing his hair like I used to when he was small. I didn't scold him, didn't cry, didn't say I told you so. I simply said softly, "Now you know." The weight of those 3 words hung in the air, not as punishment, but as truth finally taking its first breath. He wept in my arms for a long time, and though my heart ached for everything we had lost, for the first time in years, I felt something I thought was gone forever. Peace. The days that followed felt heavier than the years that came before. The house was quiet again, but this silence wasn't the same. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was wounded. Daniel started visiting every morning. He'd bring flowers, groceries, sometimes just himself, sitting on the porch like he used to when he was little. But the space between us had changed. Not wide enough to lose him again, but not close enough to reach him fully either. I didn't mean to be cold. It wasn't anger that built that distance. It was pain. Pain that ran deep enough to make even forgiveness cautious. He tried to talk. I could see it in his eyes, the need to fix what couldn't be unbroken. One evening, as the sun bled across the fields, he finally said it. "Mom," he whispered, voice trembling. "Please say something." I looked at him. The son I'd waited for, the one I'd prayed would come back. And I said quietly, "You already did, when you chose not to believe me." He looked down, tears pooling in his eyes. "I don't know how to make it right." "You can't," I said softly. "You can only make it better." And then for the first time I reached for his hand. He took it like a drowning man finally finding shore. Neither of us spoke again for a long while, but the silence between us began to heal instead of hurt. The village, of course, had its stories. They always did. But now, for once, they whispered my name with pity turned into respect. People began to see the truth. How easily kindness is mistaken for weakness, and how lies eventually choke the ones who tell them. As for Emily, she didn't vanish quietly. Rumor said she tried to fight back, but the evidence I'd collected found its way to the lawyer, and then to the authorities. The forged documents, the transfers, all traced to her name. They said she left town after that, driving off with whatever pride she had left and none of the fortune she'd schemed for. I didn't rejoice when I heard. Vengeance had never been my goal. Truth was, and I'd finally gotten it. Now when I sit in my garden, I sometimes see Daniel helping with the roses again. His hands clumsy, his voice quiet, like he's still learning how to belong here again, and maybe that's okay. Some things aren't meant to return the same way they left. Some love stories are rewritten, not restarted. Some stories don't end with words. They end with silence, the kind that holds peace instead of sorrow. It was a warm evening when I heard the creak of the old front door. I was in the garden, trimming the last of the roses, when I saw Daniel standing by the table inside, holding something in his hands. The letter. The one I never sent. The one that had waited, like I had, for the right moment to be found. He must have discovered it while helping me clear the old drawer. I never had the heart to throw it away. Now, it rested in his trembling fingers, the paper fragile from time, the ink faded but still alive. He looked at me through the window before speaking, his voice breaking. "Mom, can I read it?" I nodded. He unfolded the letter carefully, as if afraid it might fall apart. Then he began to read, his voice low, full of regret and love tangled together. "My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, it means time has taken us to a place I never wanted to reach. I don't know what you've been told or what you believe. I just know that a mother's heart never stops beating for her child, no matter how far he drifts. I don't want revenge or apologies. I just want you to be safe, to remember that love, even when broken, is still love. Maybe one day, you'll see me not as the woman you doubted, but as the mother who never stopped waiting." Mom, by the time he finished, his voice was gone, swallowed by the tears he'd been holding back for years. He pressed the letter against his chest, like he could hold all the years he'd lost inside it. I stepped out from the garden, hands stained with soil, heart full of things I didn't know how to say. For a moment, we just looked at each other, a mother and son bound not by perfection, but by forgiveness. Then he came to me slowly, the way he used to as a child after a mistake. No words, no explanations, just a trembling embrace, tight, desperate, real. The kind that says I'm sorry without having to speak it. The kind that says I love you even after everything has burned down. The sun dipped behind us, turning the garden gold. The roses swayed in the evening wind, the same roses that had listened to every tear, every prayer, and for the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't painful. It was whole, because forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's finally understanding why it all had to hurt, so love could find its way back home. Let us know in the comment, where are you watching from? Please subscribe to the channel, Her Side of the Story. Thanks for watching until here.